The world was small, safe, and smelled of cinnamon toast and sidewalk chalk. For 6 years, Alara had built this reality for her daughter, Lily, brick by fragile brick. Under the unassuming name Lena, she was just another single mother in a quiet suburban town, her past buried so deep she could almost believe it had never happened. Lily, with her sunshine hair and eyes the color of a stormy sea, was the center of this universe, a bright, burning star that eclipsed all the darkness that had come before. The phone call shattered it all. It was a Tuesday morning, the kind of ordinary day that holds no premonition of doom. Lily was humming at the small kitchen table, drawing a lopsided castle, when the shrill ring cut through their peace. Alara answered, a smile on her face for her sister Sarah. But it wasn't Sarah on the line. It was a man with a voice as cold and sterile as a hospital corridor. There had been an accident. A multi-car pileup on the interstate. Sarah was gone. The world tilted, sound dissolving into a dull roar in Alara's ears. Her hand flew to her mouth to stifle a sob, her eyes locking on Lily, who was now looking up, her crayon frozen over the paper, her sea-storm eyes wide with concern. Grief was a physical blow, stealing her breath, cracking her ribs. But then the man's next words turned the grief to ice-cold terror. "Ma'am, about your niece Lily. According to your sister's will, the designated guardian is to be contacted immediately. The arrangements are quite specific." Alara's mind raced. They had a plan. A friend, Maria, was the designated guardian. A kind, gentle woman who knew nothing of Alara's past. "It should be Maria Santos," she managed to choke out, her voice a raw whisper. There was a rustle of papers on the other end. "No, ma'am. The primary guardian listed in the event of your sister's death is a Mr. Kalen Vance." The name. A ghost's name. A devil's name. The phone slipped from her numb fingers, clattering onto the floor. Kalen. It couldn't be. The man she had faked her own death to escape. The monster from whose gilded cage she had fled, pregnant and terrified 7 years ago. The man who believed her to be nothing but ash and bitter memory. How? Why would Sarah? And then she remembered. A desperate measure from a lifetime ago. Before she'd vanished, she'd made Sarah her executor, and in a moment of paranoid planning, she'd named Kalen as a last resort guardian. It was a cruel, twisted piece of irony. Kalen, who owned half the city and whose obsession had nearly consumed her, would have the resources to protect a child, even if he never knew whose child she was. It was a plan born of fear, a plan that was never, ever supposed to come to pass. Panic clawed at her throat. She could run, grab Lily, a bag, and disappear again. But where? Kalen's reach was infinite. He would be searching for his ward, the daughter of his dead lover's sister. He would use every resource, every private investigator, every ounce of his formidable power to find this child he was now legally bound to protect. And in doing so, he would find her. There was no escape. The trap she'd set for her daughter's safety had snapped shut on her instead. Her choice was simple and devastating. Disappear and abandon her daughter to the one man she feared on earth, or walk back into the lion's den and pray he didn't recognize the ghost standing before him. There was no choice at all. Hours later, she stood before Vance Tower, a spire of black glass and steel that pierced the sky, a monument to the man's power and ambition. It was a building designed to make people feel small. It succeeded. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. She had dressed carefully, in clothes that were plain, forgettable. Her hair, once a fiery auburn he'd loved to touch, was now a muted brown, pulled back severely. She wore glasses she didn't need. It was a flimsy disguise against the man who had once claimed to know every inch of her soul. The elevator ride was a silent, suffocating ascent to the penthouse floor. The doors opened onto a reception area of marble and hushed reverence. The woman at the desk looked at her with polite dismissal until Alara gave her name. The false one, Lena. I'm here about the guardianship of Lily Rose. I'm her aunt. The lie tasted like acid. Recognition dawned in the receptionist's eyes. She was expected. A moment later, 2 massive oak doors at the end of the hall were opened, and she was ushered inside. The office was vast, with a floor-to-ceiling window that offered a god's-eye view of the city below. And there, standing with his back to her, silhouetted against the sprawling metropolis he owned, was him, Kalen Vance. He was just as she remembered, only harder, sharper. His shoulders were broader in the tailored suit, his presence a tangible force that seemed to suck the very air from the room. He turned slowly, his face a mask of cold, remote control. His eyes, the color of chips of ice, were devoid of emotion as they scanned her. For a terrifying second, she saw nothing in them, no recognition. He was looking at a stranger. Then his gaze faltered. It snagged on her face, his brow furrowing in a flicker of confusion, a ghost of a memory he couldn't quite place. He took a step forward, his head tilted. The air grew thick, heavy with the unspoken past. Years of running, of hiding, of phantom freedom, all came down to this single, heart-stopping moment. She had to speak before her courage deserted her completely. "Mr. Vance," she began, her voice shaking, a stranger's voice. But he wasn't listening. His eyes, those piercing ice-blue eyes, were locked on her, really seeing her now. The thin facade of Lena was peeling away under his intense scrutiny. The silence stretched, taut and screaming. The mask of indifference on his face cracked, replaced by a storm of disbelief, shock, and something else. Something terrifyingly familiar. A dark, possessive fire she thought she'd escaped forever. His voice, when he finally spoke, was a low, dangerous rumble that vibrated through the floor, through her very bones. Alara? Her name, spoken in his voice, was a key turning in a lock that had rusted shut 7 years ago. The sound of it stripped away her disguise, her carefully constructed new life, leaving her exposed and trembling. There was no point in denying it. Her silence was a confession. How? The word was a violent exhale, a whisper of disbelief that held the force of a roar. He closed the distance between them in 2 long, predatory strides. He didn't touch her, but his proximity was a physical weight, his familiar scent of expensive cologne and cold ambition filling her lungs, choking her. "I went to your funeral. I saw the casket lowered into the ground. I mourned you." Each word was a separate, precise blow. She could see the storm gathering behind his eyes, the shock hardening into a glacial rage. The grief he spoke of hadn't been gentle. She knew him too well. It would have been a violent, possessive sorrow, a fury that something he considered his had been taken from him. "It was the only way," she whispered, her voice raw. She forced herself to meet his gaze, to let him see the iron resolve that had grown in the years she'd been free. "The only way I could be free?" A muscle jumped in his jaw. "Free?" The word was a sneer. "You call living in some forgotten suburban town, hiding under a false name, free? I would have given you anything. You would have given me a gilded cage. You would have owned me. I wanted a life, Kalen, not a possession." He finally reached for her then, his fingers wrapping around her upper arm. The touch was both a shock and a sickeningly familiar brand. His grip wasn't brutal, but it was absolute, a reminder of the power he had always held over her. "You were never a possession, Alara. You were my world, and you burned it to the ground with your lies." His eyes scanned her face, taking in the changes, the muted hair, the plain clothes, the haunted look in her eyes that he had put there. "And now you reappear here, in my office, to talk about a child." Her breath hitched. The child, Lily. This was not about them anymore. She wrenched her arm from his grasp, the motion more shocking to him than it was forceful. "This is not about you or me. This is about my niece, Sarah's daughter." His gaze sharpened, the fury momentarily banked by cold, calculating logic. "The child, Lily, that's her name?" Alara nodded, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. "Sarah is gone. She made a mistake in that will, a mistake from a long time ago. I'm here to fix it. I will take Lily. You never have to see or hear from us again. I'll sign whatever you want, absolve you of all responsibility." He watched her, a slow, predatory smile touching his lips for the first time. It wasn't a smile of warmth, but of triumph. He had found her weakness. "Absolve me? But the law is quite clear. I am her guardian. And after what you've just admitted, faking your own death, you are hardly a stable influence. A court would agree with me." Ice flooded her veins. He was right. He had her. He could paint her as an unstable runaway, a woman who would abandon a child just as she had abandoned him. He held all the cards. "What do you want, Kaylin?" "I want the truth. But we'll get to that. For now," he said, turning and walking towards the panoramic window, "we will discuss the well-being of the child." He looked out over the city that lay at his feet. She has just lost her mother. She needs stability, consistency, a safe environment. "I can give her that. I have been giving her that." "Have you?" he countered, turning back to face her, his eyes pinning her in place. "In a life built on a lie? What happens when your past catches up to you? It just did." He let the words hang in the air, a devastating verdict. "No, I will not have my ward, my responsibility, living in the shadows. She will have the best of everything, the best security, the best education, the best home." Alara's heart pounded. She has a home. She has a new one now. He moved towards his desk, his every movement radiating a calm, terrifying authority. He pressed a button on his intercom. "Ms. Danes, have the residential suite on the 48th floor prepared immediately for a long-term guest and a child. Full staff." "Yes, Mr. Vance." Alara stared at him, horrified. "What are you doing? You can't—" "I can," he cut her off, his voice flat and final. "You will bring Lily here. You will live here, in this building, where I can ensure she is safe, where I can ensure you don't disappear again." His eyes locked with hers, and the coldness was gone, replaced by that dark, possessive fire she remembered all too well. It was the look that had made her run in the first place. "You will continue to be Lena, the grieving aunt. I will be the concerned guardian, stepping in to help. It's a perfectly plausible story. And it is not negotiable." This was a new cage. Not gilded, but made of black steel and glass, 1,000 feet in the air. She would be his prisoner again, but this time, she'd be bringing her daughter into the cell with her. The thought of Lily in this man's orbit, under his influence, made her physically ill. But what choice did she have? If she fought him, he would take Lily from her. He would use the courts, his money, his power, and he would win. He always won. To protect Lily, to stay with her, she had to surrender. "Fine," she choked out, the word tasting like defeat. "On one condition." He raised a single imperious eyebrow. "You will not try to interfere. You will be her guardian. You will provide for her. But I will raise her. You will keep your distance." He considered her for a long moment, his gaze so intense it felt like he was peeling back the layers of her soul. "For now," he said, the words a veiled promise and a threat all in one. "I will honor your role as her caregiver. But make no mistake, Alara, I lost you once. It will not happen again. You and the child, you are now under my protection, and I protect what is mine." The residential suite on the 48th floor wasn't an apartment, it was a sky palace. 3 bedrooms, a kitchen worthy of a 5-star chef, and a living area with windows that made it feel as though you were floating in the clouds. Every surface was marble, chrome, or polished wood. It was beautiful, sterile, and utterly soulless. It was a cage, and the bars were made of gold. Leaving Lily with a bewildered neighbor, Alara had returned to her small, cluttered house to pack. Every familiar object, Lily's finger paintings on the fridge, the worn spot on the sofa where they read stories, the scent of her own life, was a fresh stab of pain. She packed 2 bags, one with their clothes, the other with Lily's most treasured possessions. A stuffed rabbit named Patches, a worn copy of the Velveteen Rabbit, and a box of broken crayons. She was bringing the last remnants of their real life into the belly of the beast. The return to the tower was worse. This time, she had Lily with her. Lily's small hand was sweaty in hers as they ascended in the silent elevator. Her daughter looked up at her, her sea-storm eyes wide with a mixture of awe and confusion. "Auntie Lena, is this a castle in the sky?" Alara forced a smile that felt like cracking glass. "Something like that, sweetie. We're going to stay here for a little while." Kaylin was waiting for them when the suite door opened. He wasn't in his suit jacket anymore, just a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up his forearms, revealing a watch that probably cost more than her house. He stood with an unnerving stillness, his presence dominating the cavernous room. Alara's protective instincts screamed. She instinctively moved, putting herself slightly in front of Lily, a human shield against his power. Kaylin's eyes flickered over her defensive posture before settling on the small girl partially hidden behind her legs. For a moment, he said nothing. His face, usually a mask of cold control, was unreadable. Lily, fearless and curious, peeked around Alara's leg. "Hello," she said, her voice small but clear. The sound seemed to break a spell. Kaylin knelt, a slow, deliberate movement that was shocking in its grace. He brought himself down to her level, a titan humbling himself. "Hello, Lily," he said, his voice softer than Alara had heard it in years. It was the voice he had once used only with her, in the dead of night, when the world was asleep. Lily took a hesitant step forward. Kaylin didn't move, didn't reach for her. He simply waited. He was letting her come to him. Lily looked up at Alara for permission. Swallowing the lump of terror in her throat, Alara gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. Lily walked right up to him. "You're very big," she observed, tilting her head. A ghost of a smile touched Kaylin's lips. "And you are very small." Then Lily's gaze fixed on his face, her expression one of intense concentration. Her sea-storm eyes, so like her mother's, stared directly into his ice-blue ones. The air crackled. It was like seeing 2 mirrors reflecting the same impossible truth back at each other. Alara's heart stopped. He had to see it. He had to know. Kaylin's smile faded, replaced by a profound stillness. He stared into the child's eyes, a deep furrow forming between his brows. It wasn't recognition, not yet. It was something deeper, a sense of impossible familiarity, of a chord being struck in a forgotten part of his soul. The image of them, the powerful, broken man and the innocent, unknowingly connected child, sent a tremor through Alara, and the present dissolved. The rain was lashing against the windows of his penthouse, a different one from a lifetime ago. A storm had blown in, wild and furious, and she, who had always loved storms, was suddenly afraid. The power had gone out, plunging the entire top of the city into darkness, lit only by the violent flashes of lightning. "I don't like it," she'd whispered, curled against him on a sofa, wrapped in a cashmere blanket that smelled of him. "It's too much." Kaylin had held her tighter, his arms a circle of warmth and strength in the chaotic dark. He wasn't afraid of the storm. He seemed to command it. "It's just noise and light, Alara. It can't hurt you in here." He had tilted her chin up, his thumb stroking her cheek. "Nothing can hurt you when you're with me. I'll never let anything touch you. I'll protect you, even if it costs me everything. And she had believed him. In that moment, his possessiveness hadn't felt like a cage. It had felt like the ultimate shield. His obsession was a consuming fire, and she had been happy to warm her hands by it, never realizing she was meant to be the fuel. She blinked, the memory receding, leaving an ache in its wake. Kalen was still kneeling before Lily, his hand now gently holding Patches the rabbit, which Lily had offered him. He was examining the stuffed animal with a seriousness that was both bizarre and touching. "He's missing an eye," Kalen noted, his voice a low rumble. "He's a pirate," Lily explained matter-of-factly. "He's very brave." "I see." Kalen looked up from the rabbit, his gaze finding Ilara's over Lily's head. The confusion was still there, but something else had joined it. A raw, unguarded emotion she couldn't name. It was vulnerability. It was the first crack in his armor she had seen in 7 years. He looked lost. Later that night, long after Lily was asleep in a bedroom that looked like it belonged to a princess, Ilara stood by the massive window, looking down at the river of lights that was the city. She felt him approach before she heard him. "She's extraordinary," he said, his voice quiet in the darkened room. "She's a child," Ilara replied, not turning. "She's innocent." A warning. "I know what she is." He stopped a few feet away from her. The space between them was charged with unspoken history. Her eyes, they're the color of the sea before a storm. Ilara's blood ran cold. It was the exact phrase he had once used to describe hers. "It's a family trait," she said, her voice tight. He was silent for a long time. She could feel his gaze on her, intense and questioning. "All these years," he said, his voice laced with a strange, hollow quality. "I built this empire, thinking it would fill the void you left. I acquired companies, crushed rivals, bought everything a man could ever want. But it's all just stone and glass, noise and light." He was echoing the words from her memory, from the night of the storm. Tonight, watching her, seeing her in this place, it was the first time it didn't feel empty. He took a step closer. She still didn't turn, but her entire body was rigid. "I won't let anything happen to her, Ilara," he vowed, his voice a low, fierce promise. "I failed to protect you. I will not fail her." The words were meant to be a comfort, a reassurance. But all she heard was the sound of a lock clicking shut, the final, definitive closing of her new, beautiful cage. The days that followed settled into a strange, suffocating rhythm. Kalen was a ghost in their lives, a powerful presence felt more than seen. He left before Lily woke up and returned long after she was asleep. But his influence was everywhere. A world-renowned tutor was hired for Lily's homeschooling. Toys that cost more than Ilara's old car appeared in Lily's room. A closet in her own bedroom had been filled with designer clothes she refused to touch, a silent, daily reminder of the life he wanted to force upon her. He was keeping his word, keeping his distance, but it was a calculated distance, the patience of a predator waiting for its prey to lower its guard. He was studying them. Sometimes she would catch him on the security feed monitor in the main hallway, his image frozen as he watched recordings of Lily playing in the suite's private garden terrace. The sight sent a chill down her spine. He was searching for something, some answer to a question he didn't yet know how to ask. Their fragile truce shattered on a Wednesday. He was home early, a rare occurrence. He found Ilara and Lily on the floor of the living room, building a lopsided tower out of expensive magnetic blocks. Lily's laughter echoed in the vast, sterile space, a small pocket of warmth in the cold luxury. "There's a charity gala on Saturday," Kalen announced from the doorway, his voice pulling Ilara from the moment like a cold hand. "We will be attending." Ilara looked up, her smile vanishing. "We? No, Lily and I don't attend galas." My ward will be introduced to society in a controlled environment, and you, as her aunt, will be by her side. His tone was flat, leaving no room for argument. It's a security concern. I need to know where you both are. I am not one of your assets to be displayed, Kaylin. His eyes narrowed. He took a step into the room, his gaze flicking to Lily, who had stopped playing and was watching them with wide, uncertain eyes. Tonight, he said, his voice dropping to a low, non-negotiable command. You are. A car will be here at 7. Be ready. He turned and left before she could say another word. On Saturday evening, a gown was laid out on her bed. It was deep emerald green, the color of a forest at dusk, made of silk that felt like water against the skin. It was painfully beautiful. It was a dress the old Alara would have worn. Putting it on felt like putting on a ghost's skin, a betrayal of the simple, safe life she had built as Lena. The gala was a glittering nightmare, a sea of diamonds and fake smiles. Kaylin was a king in his element, powerful and revered. His hand was a constant, possessive weight on the small of her back as he guided her through the crowd, introducing her only as Lena, my ward's aunt. People looked at her with curiosity, their eyes lingering on the way Kaylin stood so close, the way his knuckles were white as he held his champagne glass. It was during a lull in conversation that a man approached them. He was handsome in a cruel, sharp way, with eyes that held a reptilian coldness. Vance, the man said, his smile not reaching his eyes. I see you're still collecting beautiful things. His gaze swept over Alara, insolent and proprietary. Kaylin's body went rigid. His arm tightened around her waist, pulling her impossibly closer. Thorn, Kaylin's voice was pure ice. I'm surprised you have the courage to show your face here. Business is business, Thorn replied with a shrug. Some of us know how to recover from a loss, and how to repay our debts. The threat was unmistakable, a viper coiled beneath the polite words. Thorn's gaze dropped to Alara's stomach for a fraction of a second, a flicker of an idea, before he smiled again and moved on, disappearing into the crowd. Who was that? Alara whispered, her heart hammering. No one you need to worry about, Kaylin said, his jaw tight. Stay close to me. The rest of the evening was a blur of tension. Kaylin never left her side. An hour later, he abruptly said, We're leaving. His security team materialized around them, forming a tight phalanx as they moved towards the exit. The sense of urgency was palpable. As they stepped out into the cool night air, Kaylin's head of security spoke into his earpiece, his face grim. Sir, the primary vehicle has been compromised. We're using the backup. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced Alara. This was real. The man, Thorn, this was his doing. They were hustled into a black armored SUV. The doors locked with a heavy, final thud. As the vehicle pulled out into the street, Kaylin was on his phone, his voice clipped and lethal. Find him. That's when it happened. A dark sedan shot out from a side street, ramming into their rear quarter panel with a deafening screech of tortured metal. The SUV fishtailed wildly. Alara was thrown against Kaylin, his arm instinctively wrapping around her, shielding her body with his own. Go, now! Kaylin roared at the driver. The SUV's engine screamed as it accelerated. Another car joined the first, boxing them in. Alara could see the dark shapes of men inside, the glint of something metallic. Her mind didn't scream for herself. It screamed for Lily, safe in the tower, unaware, the thought of them getting to her. The driver, a man with nerves of steel, swerved violently, driving up onto the sidewalk, sending pedestrians scattering. A window behind them shattered, glass exploding into the cabin. Kaylin shoved Alara's head down, covering her completely. All she could hear was the roar of the engine, the frantic shouts of the security team, and the blood pounding in her ears. It felt like an eternity, but it was over in minutes. They had lost them. The SUV sped through the city, taking a circuitous route back to the tower. When they finally pulled into the secure underground garage, the silence was deafening. Ilara was trembling, unable to stop. Kalen's arm was still around her, his grip like iron. They rode the private elevator to the penthouse in absolute silence. The moment the doors opened, Kalen was barking orders. Full lockdown. I want a perimeter sweep every 10 minutes. Get me eyes on Thorne, now. He all but dragged her inside and slammed the door. He turned to her, his face a mask of cold, controlled fury. But beneath it, she saw something else, something raw and terrifying. Fear. This, he said, his voice a low, shaking growl, is why. This is the world I live in, the world you ran from. Do you think your little suburban fantasy could have protected you from that? She flinched, but she wouldn't let him see her break. Lily would have been safe. None of this would have happened if we weren't with you. He would have found you, he roared, his control finally snapping. He grabbed her by the shoulders, his grip bruising. To hurt me, they will always look for a weakness. And you, Ilara, you were always my weakness. His face was inches from hers, his ice blue eyes burning with a desperate, frantic light. He was looking at her not as a possession, not as a complication, but as something he had almost lost for a second time. The fury in his eyes warred with a stark, undisguised terror. His hands, still gripping her shoulders, trembled. When that glass shattered, he started, his voice cracking, the sound utterly foreign. He closed his eyes for a second, a shudder running through his powerful frame. He looked utterly broken. I can't lose you again. The confession hung between them, raw and bleeding. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a claim of ownership. It was a plea, a devastating admission of vulnerability from the most powerful man she had ever known. And in that moment, the wall she had so carefully built around her heart began to crumble. His raw, broken confession hung in the air, a truth more fragile and more dangerous than any lie she had ever told. The sound of his vulnerability was a key, unlocking a part of her she thought had died 7 years ago. Her own carefully constructed walls, built of fear and self-preservation, began to fracture. She saw a thin trickle of blood on his temple where a shard of glass must have struck him. Without thinking, her hand came up, her fingers gently brushing the wound. He flinched at her touch, not in pain, but in shock, as if he'd forgotten what her gentleness felt like. His grip on her shoulders loosened, his hands sliding down to her arms, holding her as if he were afraid she might evaporate. "You're hurt," she whispered. "It's nothing," he rasped. But his eyes, those piercing blue eyes, were filled with a storm of emotions she couldn't begin to decipher. Rage, fear, and a desperate, aching longing that mirrored the one she had buried deep inside herself. The moment was shattered by the sharp chime of his phone. He ignored it. It chimed again, insistent. With a curse, he released her and snatched the device from his pocket. His eyes scanned the screen, and every ounce of color drained from his face. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by a terrifying, primal fury that was colder and more lethal than anything she had ever seen from him. "What is it?" she asked, a new dread coiling in her stomach. He didn't answer. He simply turned the phone towards her. The screen showed a photograph. It was of Lily, asleep in her bed upstairs. The photo was time-stamped just 2 minutes ago. It was taken from an angle high in the corner of the room, an angle that shouldn't have been possible. Below the image was a single line of text, "A beautiful child. It would be a shame if her guardian failed to protect her. The Phoenix contract is mine by midnight, or you lose something irreplaceable." The air left Ilara's lungs in a silent scream. Thorne. He wasn't outside the tower, he was in, or he had eyes inside. Her baby, her innocent sleeping baby, was a target. The cage had not kept them safe, it had simply trapped them with the monster. Kalen was already moving, his voice a low, deadly command into his phone. "Lock down this floor, no one in or out. Sweep every room, find the breach, now." He was a whirlwind of controlled violence, a general commanding an army. But Alara saw past the rage. She saw the sheer, unadulterated terror in his eyes. He was terrified of failing, of losing this child entrusted to his care. But he didn't understand. He didn't know the full stakes. He was fighting to protect his ward. She needed him to fight like a father. She grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong, stopping him in his tracks. He turned to her, his expression murderous. "Not now, Alara. You don't understand," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "You don't understand why he chose her, why she is your only weakness. Because he knows I am her guardian, because he knows I will not let a child be harmed." "No!" she cried, the sound tearing from her throat. The years of lies, the weight of her secret, it was all coming undone. There was only one truth that mattered now, one truth that could save her daughter. "He chose her because he suspects what I have hidden from the world for 7 years. He chose her because he knows she is more than just your ward." His face was a mask of confusion, his rage momentarily forgotten. "What are you talking about?" She looked him directly in the eye, letting him see all the pain, all the fear, and all the love she had carried alone for so long. She let him see the truth before she ever spoke it. "The night before I disappeared," she began, her voice dropping to a raw, trembling whisper. "The last time you held me. It wasn't the end, Kaylin. It was a beginning." He stared at her, his mind clearly racing, trying to piece together the impossible. His gaze flickered towards the hallway leading to Lily's room, then back to her face. He saw her eyes, the color of a stormy sea. He saw Lily's eyes in his memory, and a devastating, world-altering understanding began to dawn on his face. She took a shaky breath and delivered the final, life-shattering blow. "This child is yours." The words landed with the force of a physical impact. He stumbled back a step, his hand hitting the wall as if for support. "No," he breathed, shaking his head. "It can't be. She has your determination, your intelligence," Alara continued, tears now streaming down her face. "And she has my eyes. Don't tell me you haven't seen it. Don't tell me you haven't felt it." He stared at her, his powerful frame trembling. The logic, the numbers, the cold, hard facts that ruled his world were dissolving into an emotional tidal wave. The strange, inexplicable pull he'd felt towards Lily, the fierce, almost paternal protectiveness, the way a single look from her could silence the chaos in his mind. It all made a terrible, beautiful sense. Disbelief warred with a flicker of pure, unadulterated joy, which was then consumed by a wave of profound, soul-crushing agony. 7 years, he whispered, the sound broken. "You kept my daughter from me for 7 years. Kept her secret," she sobbed. "Kept her secret from me. The last 2 words struck him harder than any bullet. He looked at her, and all the rage, all the fury was gone, replaced by a grief so profound it seemed to hollow him out. In that moment, he finally understood. He had been the monster she was running from. Then something shifted. The grief hardened, not into coldness, but into a diamond-hard resolve. The last trace of Kaylin Vance, the ruthless businessman, died. In his place stood a father. He straightened up, his eyes now holding a light of lethal purpose that made the air itself seem to freeze. He picked up his phone and made one more call. His voice was perfectly calm, devoid of all emotion, and it was the most terrifying sound Alara had ever heard. "Kill the deal, and kill him. I don't care what it costs. He doesn't see the sunrise." He hung up. The threat was neutralized. It was over. He turned back to Alara, his expression unreadable. Without a word, he walked past her, down the hall, and pushed open the door to Lily's room. She followed, her heart in her throat. Lily was still asleep, her small face peaceful, unaware of the war that had just been fought for her. Kalen stood over her bed, just watching her breathe. A single tear escaped his eye and traced a path down his stone-like face. He slowly reached out a trembling hand, hesitating for a moment before gently, reverently, brushing a strand of sunshine-colored hair from her forehead. He had lost 7 years, a lifetime of first steps, first words, of scraped knees and bedtime stories. The weight of that loss was a physical presence in the room. He turned to Alara, his eyes holding the entirety of that loss, but also something else, a fragile, desperate hope. "I will not lose another second," he vowed, his voice thick with emotion. "I will spend the rest of my life earning the right to be her father, and I will protect you both, not as a guardian, not as a captor, but because you are mine, not my possessions, my everything." He stepped towards her, closing the distance between them. And for the first time in 7 years, he was not a storm to be feared, but a harbor. And Alara, for the first time in 7 years, felt the astonishing, terrifying, and undeniable pull of coming home.